Welcome to Space for Work, and in this overview, I'm going to give you a orientation to Space for Work, a walkthrough, and some how-tos. And Space for Work follows the idea that we all lead from the inside first. And one thing you can ask yourself as we go through this whole presentation is check in with yourself as you're listening to see if you can figure out which part of you is listening through this presentation. Because at any point in time, if you think of yourself like a company filled with staff and exec team and even maybe a CEO, someone is leading your inner company. And Space for Work is really about managing who that is and how your team, your inner team, can work together, especially navigating some of the tougher situations at work. So this is a good question to ask yourself, which is, who has your inner CEO been? If you look back, who has been the person that reacts or responds or is driving most of the decisions at work? And who is your inner CEO right now while you're listening to this video? It could be there's an impatient part of you wanting me to get to the point. It could be that there is a super curious part or a student part. But just maybe follow the idea as we go through this Space for Work orientation that who sits in the chair is really, really important. And you've got so many different characters to choose from. At any one point in time, it could be that your listener shows up, your skeptic, your celebrator, your hoarder, and so many other ones, depending on what's going on at the moment inside of you, what's going on in your environment at work, and what kinds of projects are happening, what kind of stress is happening, who you're working with, and how you're managing your inner world. And the interesting thing about the who is that these parts of us that show up when things get challenging are some of the hardest parts of leadership. So if you think about it, the kind of stuff that shows up at work comes from some of our hardest, some of the hardest parts of ourselves on the inside. And why is that? It's because, well, first of all, we are operating at a Maslow's level of basics. Like, this is where we earn our money, how we get our food and shelter. A lot's at stake when we're doing our work. Another thing is there's tremendous amounts of stress at work. There's always a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves and that exists in our environments, in our cultures, and with the work that we're doing. And that stress can bring out, just like in our personal lives, that stress can bring out some of our guardian parts, some of the parts that are trying to protect us, some of the parts of us that we have to suppress in order to fit into companies can make it hard, right? When we're trying to fit in and we're not completely ourselves, then it can create lots of opportunities for these other parts of us to show up and maybe not the best decisions be made. So things like being super tired all the time, being in competition with other people. There's a lot of egoic parts of people that are at play in the workplace. And so this is often one of the most challenging places to show up with inner leadership. And that's why we made Space for Work, is to help you navigate these times where it is very, very hard. And there's a couple of quotes that I really like about this. The first one is from Parker Palmer, who said that a good leader is intensely aware of both the light and shadow, or light and dark parts of us on the inside, and that leadership, depending on where it comes from, whether it comes from that shadow or from that light, is the difference between good leadership and bad leadership. And the second quote is from my friend Dave Hirsch, who said the era of pretending to have all your shit together is coming to an end, which I really like that quote, because where I think things are going, and if you look around the world right now, all the skill sets that we have developed for us at work, all the decision sciences, being really good at our jobs, have been very outside world oriented, very much what's happening around us at work. And there's always these big cultural changes at work. I mean, how people went to work and behaved in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It keeps changing, and it keeps changing in many different ways because of a lot of cultural changes, technology changes, and with the advent of AI coming in and being able to take over a lot of that outside world responsibility, the pendulum is moving over to a place where there's a lot more value in vulnerability and being able to show up authentically, a lot of pushback against toxic cultures, toxic work behaviors. There was a time that martini lunches and harassment, sexual harassment at work was considered okay, and then it became not okay really fast. And a lot of the skills around being able to be authentic show up in a more in a self-led way, where you have agency over your own feelings and your own, what's true for you, and being able to stand inside of yourself in the strongest way possible is really where the new frontier is. And again, that is what Space for Work is all about. And just to make this less abstract, because sometimes this stuff can get squishy, I wanted to hit on a couple points. And that is, a lot of these numbers come from EQ. Move my head over here. EQ studies, emotional intelligence, and becoming a lot more in touch with yourself at work. And there's the people that do and the people that don't. And the people that do, probably your intuition, if you've gotten this far with space and unfollowing and this kind of work, you probably already very well know that there is a huge advantage to the people who do invest in their inner leadership, in their inner world. And some of the studies that I found around this are, being able to earn twice as much as your peers, having 75% more opportunities, burning out a lot less. That should not be a surprise to you. It's good to see it justified in numbers. But also, and sometimes I should say, is all you can do is take care of yourself. You might be buying Space for Work just for yourself. You might be a company of one. You might be in a very small company where the rest of your company might not be interested in this. But these gains are really individual. So these kinds of gains will happen for you even if you're in that situation. And if you're not, and you are working at a company, and you are working with a team with Space for Work, then the company gains are just as impressive. See if I can go to the next slide here. So, and move my head again. Getting used to this. There is big company impact, and you can imagine if a lot of people that work together have strong inner leadership and have really practiced, much like an athlete does, to show up in stressful situations and be able to navigate them with a lot of proficiency, then the company overall does a lot more in terms of sales, 13% more, according to these studies. For every dollar the company invests, they get $14 back, and a whole lot less people are quitting because they're in the right place that's aligned with them company-wise. So these are real gains. And let's get back to the idea that we develop, I'm right on the owl, that we develop ourselves for our skills, I should say, for the outside world. We become as good as we can at marketing, as good as we can at sales, as good as we can at operations and product development and customer support and project management and accounting and finance and all these skills. And so many of those skills are rapidly changing. And they've become commodities. The same marketing plans and ideas and metrics and dashboards and OKRs and ways of framing our work is you can walk into pretty much any company and they have these skills developed and they are being eaten by software very fast. So like I said before, this new frontier comes from developing your skills for the inside world, which is a very, very, very different skill set. And that is where leadership starts. It starts on the inside. So, if we're standing in a hard situation and people are ignoring you or people are talking over you, or you're not being heard, or your ideas are getting pushed back, or all kinds of stuff. Something happens inside of you, and you can react or respond in a way that that makes, those choose your own adventure books, where, based on your response, the story goes one way or another way. And that's why these moments are so critical, again, much like sports. And that's because on the inside of us, we really do, a lot of us are out of touch with who's leading at any one time. A lot of us don't have an inner CEO. We have these protective parts that are kind of sitting around or responding or avoiding or doing something on the inside without that inner leadership skill that's developed. So what I wanted to do to start this orientation to space for work is to slowly break down the major components in the product now that you have the product, since most of you watching this will have it. And if you don't, it'll still give you a very good overview of space for work. So this whole idea of your inner leadership, you can use the analogy like your mind is a company. It's you Inc. And you Inc. is looking for a CEO, and sometimes has different parts of you that come in as a CEO. But there's lots of different parts inside of you. And so what I want to do is hit what those parts are and tell you what the main 3 ingredients are for space for work. And the main 3 ingredients, I'm going to put myself in the chair so it looks like I'm sitting in it. There you go. The main 3 ingredients are your guardian parts, the parts of you that are protective, your creator parts, and the situation that those parts of you are in. So it could be that you have to say the hard thing is the situation. So the whole product follows the idea that you've got these guardian parts, you've got these creator parts, and there's these situations that you have at work. And that's the fundamental basics of space for work. And the guardian parts are interesting. So these are protective parts. They are not bad parts. They are protective parts. So they're looking out for you, your career, sometimes the company, sometimes the project that you're working on. And they show up in so many different ways. So you will notice as we get into the product walkthrough how many different guardians. I think we have about 40 of them in the product. And they're things like the prover part of you, the part of you that feels like an impostor, the part of you that wavers, the overconfident part, maybe the doubting part, the part of you that doubts things a lot, and lots more. And that's one whole part of the product, is your guardians, your protective parts. The second major part of the product are your creators, and these are your leadership parts, your value generation parts, and they are the ones that that care about the most about building, about connecting, about relationships, about growth. And they span also another 40 that are in the product, and they're everything. The inspirational part of you, the collaboration part of you, the passionate part of you, the student part of you, the problem-solving part of you, and again, we will give you that orientation. So that's the second major piece of space for work. The third one is the situations I mentioned, and I think there's like 42 different situations in space for work. Those situations were the ones that came up the most when we did our research in companies and with executive coaches, and we pulled those together as much as we possibly could and picked the most common ones. They are not by any stretch of the imagination the total situations that you can run into at work, but they are a lot of the hardest ones. And they're color-coded, you'll see in the product, based on different categories. So those are the 3 main elements of space for work. And from here, what I want to do is give you a walkthrough of one of the ways you can use space for work and show it in action.